The following podcast is a deep, shallow dive production.
And you're going to love it.
Okay, let's go.
If they say things are off limits, nothing's off limits.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That is the first sign of a good politician. All right, listen, everybody. Today is one of 2 days I've been looking forward to. And Royce, there's been two people that have been on my hit list to bring on. One is yourself, and I'm not even bullshitting you about that. Like, I'm really excited about this conversation. And then the second one is going to be who I want your opinion on, and that's Nick Fuentes. So you and Nick Fuentes, I'm not kidding, man. When it comes to depth of quality, I seriously would put you guys at the top of the list right now. And I enjoy listening to Nick. I enjoy listening to you. Let's start there, man. What are your thoughts on him?
Well, he's obviously talented, like everybody says. I mean, there's no question about that. And he's wrestling with the right things. I mean, I think he's doing what people are afraid of, what makes people uncomfortable, what's inconvenient for people, and that's he's saying some things that, in my opinion, are for lack of a better term, sensational. He says some sensational things for effect. Part of it is comedy. Part of the thing I don't like about our society right now is we love comedy, we love reality TV, we love to be entertained, but we don't want people to mix entertainment and jokes with their political opinions, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's times where he's obviously joking, and I think people try and take that out of context and use it to discredit all of the very honest and I think accurate, serious things that he says. So, I think when you have a podcast go #1 on Spotify, and then they deplatform you, it speaks for itself, right? I mean, there's probably nothing I could say about Nick that would be any more revealing than the fact that Spotify deplatformed him, and as soon as his podcast went #1, and I think the entire country, but specifically the conservative movement right now, is making the same fatal mistake that the liberal establishment, the globalist establishment made with regards to President Trump on his rise, right? Kind of just dismissed him out of hand. They said, oh, this is some lightning in a bottle situation. And his fan base or his base are just crazy people who are racist or bigots or whatever the case may be, misogynists and whatnot, Christo-fascists, Christo-nationalist fascists like me. But that ended up not being the case. And I think Nick is striking a chord that everybody has to pay attention to. I mean, if you want to talk about the details of what Nick is saying, then that's something different. But obviously, he struck a chord for a guy who's been deplatformed, for a guy who's been shadow banned, for a guy who's been debanked, and everything else. He's certainly persevered, and his voice is as powerful as ever right now.
No, it totally is. And, one of the things that I've always appreciated about you is you kind of go at everybody, Republican, Democrat, neocon, neoliberal, everybody. And he does the same thing. And so I'll be honest, one thing I've been doing is sometimes I'm like, okay, well, what is it about Nick? Is there anything weird going on there? And I'll tell you, the weird thing I did think was, about 45 days ago, Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens teamed up against him. And it was visceral. It was like Candace and Tucker. I mean, it was visceral against Nick.
I saw it.
And then, last week, Nick sits down with Tucker. And again, I enjoyed that conversation. I really did. But for me, it was like, wait a minute, man, those guys went from being so against one another to not even really addressing that piece and just moving on. Then it makes me think, shit, was that a setup? Was that something? And I'll tell you, I kind of have gotten that piece of mentality, honestly, a little bit from you. And I want to jump into the Trump stuff.
Well, hold on, wait. Let's stay with Nick for a second. Let's explore that because, I would say because of the gravity of the people involved, being Nick, who has a huge following and audience, Tucker, who has a huge following and audience, Candace. So the three of them together make up some of the most influential alternative media, people in the world right now. So I'd say the gravity of it calls into question the honesty of it, right? I mean, whether or not it's on the up and up or whether it was set up. I don't know. I kind of get the sense that in this crazy new world of alternative media podcasters, content creators, and whatnot, you had two people like Tucker and Nick who, in recent times, Tucker's kind of existed in his own orbit since he's left Fox News, and then Nick, who's sort of always existed in his own orbit. And even for myself, as somebody who does a podcast, we think that more people know who we are than really do, or we have an inflated sense of our own audience. Even I'll be at the state fair, for example, and people will come up to me and say, "Hey, I'm listening to the podcast every week." I'm like, that doesn't dawn on me because I sit in the studio right here and I talk to a camera by myself in a room.
Right.
And unless you're really paying attention to the metrics, or you have a very a robust communication system with your audience, which is still kind of difficult because, I mean, how do you know who's emailing you and who's leaving comments and whatnot? Unless that's the case, it's hard to get a real measure of. So I think that when a Tucker and a Nick brush up against each other, the natural impetus is to hit each other with a couple shots.
Yeah.
And the tendency is to go for the most sensational thing possible.
Yeah.
Even though it's kind of casual and on the surface, like obviously what he said about Tucker's dad was true. His dad did work for the government.
Yeah.
And obviously there's still great question about January 6th and Nick Fuentes being there. And now that we know that feds were involved in, some of the things that he said, but you could say that about a lot of people. And, so there's always going to be that potential to kind of, jump at each other's throats and say, hey, this person's fake, that person's fake. The reality is I look at who a person's enemies are, and I try and measure how far they're willing to go to really silence them. Like Alex Jones, for example. Even people say about Alex Jones, they go, oh, well, he's bought and paid for. He's a deep state plant. And it's like, okay, well, I mean, if they're going out of their way to prop up people as plants, just to then go out, you should be offended because it's your tax money, right? I mean, if they're going to spend that much time and energy and marshal those type of resources to take these people out or silence them, then we should be offended on two levels. I think Tucker's smart. He's sharp. He has the right pulse on a lot of issues. He has the benefit of coming from inside the machine, so he knows what the accepted mainstream narrative is, and he's able to craft and curate a message that's counter to that because he has intimate knowledge. Nick has always been a nomad and on his own, so his is, in my opinion, a more genuine expression of the frustration from his age group, right, and from the people who have nothing to do with the machine. And it was cool to see them get together and have a conversation. And I don't understand the impulse to censor and silence people. I remember, Christopher Wallace's father doing an interview with David Duke, with the Grand Wizard of the KKK, and people accepted. They wanted to hear it. They said, okay, this is good. Journalists are supposed to interview people who are persona non grata or who have detestable views. We want to know what the darkness is out there in the world. And I'm not saying that's true of Nick. Yeah. But I am saying that just in principle, the attempt to silence both Tucker and Nick is alarming, especially for the conservative movement.
Yeah, absolutely. And the challenge right now is the silencing is coming from the conservative movement. It's splitting it in two. And I know you're real close with Steve Bannon and you think highly of Steve. I'm assuming still, and I do as well. I've really enjoyed a lot of Steve's content. I've learned a lot from him. I can't say I'm down with his saying Trump 2028 only because I don't think any president should run 3 terms. Maybe you do, but what's going on? What's going on with the conservative movement? What is the deal, man?
First off, first off, I love Trump 2028.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why in a moment. But I think Steve's Steve, the thing about Steve is his command of history and his depth of knowledge of the institutions from a strategic standpoint is so ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
He's living in his own. He's like 50 steps ahead. And it's from a strategical and tactical standpoint too. So it's not just opinion. He's really quarterbacking the entire MAGA movement.
Right.
If you really watch closely, the things that he says 2 months prior become the policy that come to pass later on, and for good reason. Even like the shock troops and everybody being ready to go in and start to deconstruct the administrative state on day one of this second Trump term was, all of our guys are Russ Vought. These are all war room people, right?
Yeah.
Now they still have internal fights in the administration with people who aren't really war room type people, and we've had some war room people, I'd say, defect, or they've come into question, right? Like, and I like Kash Patel a lot, but it's right to have questions about how the FBI is operating, and I don't say that as a personal attack on Kash, because I'm sure people don't understand how big the FBI is and how powerful it is, and I'm sure that becoming the director, he's been walked into a few rooms and said, hey son, we know that you're here. We like that the president put you up, and that's all good, but there are two different governments in this country, right? So I could imagine that he's dealing with a lot that we can't even comprehend, only in like, sci-fi government movies and shit. But the thing about Bannon, and the reason why I support and respect the Trump 2028 idea, it comes from, you have to look at where we are right now and ask yourself two questions. Is there anything that we can do to change the trajectory, or do we ride this thing out and watch the bottom fall out of the entire deal? Right.
Mm-hmm.
If we're going to just sit here as we, kind of boil in the pot, frog in the pot type of deal, and just let the bottom fall out of it, then there's nothing much anybody can really do other than to comment and sort of document the history of this epic failure of our empire, of this country. If you come from the other perspective where you say there is something we can do, now you have to ask yourself, how severe how severe is the situation? And if you say the left has shown us who they are, and if they get the chance, they'll kill us, they'll throw us in prison, they'll censor us, they'll silence us, they'll debank us, they'll do anything necessary, even completely detached from reality, in order to achieve their political goals, then I kind of agree with what Nick said on the podcast with Tucker, and that is, you have to crush these people right now while you have the power. And I don't mean in a violent way, like we should round them up and kill them.
Right.
I do think there should be charges brought up. I do think there should be prosecutions. I don't know how severe they should be. I'm hesitant to say that we should, depending on who we're talking about. Like Dr. Fauci, okay, that's a different level. But like in South Africa, they had these truth commissions, and I don't think we should go full truth commission where you come, you tell us the truth, you tell us how you were involved, and we give you a pass. No, people should do some jail time. Tina Peters is sitting in prison right now, and there are some people in the government who have been involved in the destruction of this country who should see some time in prison for their involvement. I don't know if we should send them to jail for life like they try to do President Trump, or we should sue them for billions like they did Alex Jones, but people should face some consequences. So that should happen, but also we have to understand the institutional momentum that's been built over the last 50 to 60 years in this country. And if we have any shot whatsoever of saving this country, there are things in motion that have been in motion far longer than our political awakening, right? Like, and I always, when I was on Whitlock, and I know we'll talk about Whitlock in a moment, but I always talked about the post-World War II Democrat liberal order, geopolitical philosophy, and the sort of the ideological framework of the modern day globalist agenda and power and influence. And these things have been working on a generational basis, and they're 3 to 4 generations ahead of us at least. So to say, hey, if Trump needs another 4 years, now if it went beyond Trump 2028, now I'm out too, right? If we're going to Trump 32, nah, we can't do it. But again, in this moment, who is the person who is most likely to disrupt the plans that have already been set in motion. And that is obviously President Trump as the field sits right now. I take President Trump over Bernie Sanders, AOC. I take President Trump over Marco Rubio and DeSantis. I take President Trump over, give me Michelle Obama. I take President Trump over all of these people in 2028 in our nation's darkest hour, and we're still in our nation's darkest hour. So I think there's some merit to it. Your second question is about the conservative movement in general. The conservative movement is built upon a lie. I'm just gonna say it like it is. I mean, you go back to, and I played the other night on my podcast, the 1980 debate between Ronald Reagan and George Bush Sr.
Yep.
Such a revealing debate. It really is. It really shows kind of the situation we're in now in some respects, where you have one wing of the conservative movement that's becoming very popular nationwide, but it stems from a more blue-collar Democrat origin, right? President Trump. It's the sine qua non of the MAGA movement, obviously, and he was a Democrat, right? But he was a, sort of old school common sense blue collar Democrat. Now, I don't say blue collar because I know he's rich and he comes from a wealthy family. I mean that New York City is a very blue collar place.
Yeah.
And the hospitality business is a very blue collar industry. And even the real estate business and the developer business in some respects is a very blue collar industry because it's very hands on, got to get dirty. The deals are dangerous to say the least, but they're it's a people industry. It's not a tech bro sort of kind of abstract industry. So, and you watch Reagan and some of the things that he said, and then the rebuttals by Bush Sr., and you start to realize, like, even back in the 1980s, there was a faux conservative movement. And we call it the neoconservative movement.
Yeah.
We call them neocons for a reason. You think about the post-World War II Democrat liberal order. You think about all of these Republicans and conservatives who say they're trying to conserve the international rules-based order, which is another way to say the Democrat liberal order. I mean, imagine conservatives trying to conserve the Democrat liberal order. Even on its face, it's ridiculous. And it really has been for like the last, 40 years, the entire base of conservative thought leadership, the intellectual thought leadership, all the way back to, Buckley and the National Review and that entire echelon of highbrow conservative
that
intellectuals.
Project for a New America Century, all that stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, the problem is, man, all that stuff and all those guys, to me, that was the beginning of the hijacking of America. Like Bush. I mean, I kind of consider him the kingpin of fucking us up, sending us into Iraq, Afghanistan. I mean, 9/11, we can get into that shit, but
we got to go back before. You got to go back before. You got to go back before Iraq and Afghanistan, right? Like, again, I'll say, think of and he really showed us his card. This guy really showed his cards in the last couple of weeks with the Mamdani election in New York City. But think about Bill Kristol's father.
Oh, yeah. Richard.
Okay, Bill Kristol's, Irving Kristol.
Irving, okay, got it, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so Bill Kristol comes out and endorses Mamdani, right? Which is mind-boggling in and of itself. I mean, for a guy to say, for a conservative Jewish, quote unquote, a conservative Jewish American to endorse a communist socialist Muslim it's oxymoronic almost. I mean, it almost doesn't make sense unless you understand what you and I are talking about right now. And, Bill Kristol's father, Irving Kristol, was a Trotskyite.
Yeah.
And for a long time, Irving Kristol was probably the foremost intellectual thought leader of the American conservative movement. And so you find that a lot of these neoconservatives in that era came from a Trotskyite philosophical background. And, the story of Trotsky is obviously a communist. He was the second in line to Stalin. And when, he was the second in line there in Russia. And when Stalin came to power, he kicked Trotsky and the rest of the Trotskyites out. They end up in Mexico, South America. And then all of a sudden we kind of absorbed them into the American, the American conservative movement, the same way we did the Nazis with paperclip. You see a kind of similar thing happen there with the Trotskyites, but they become the controlled opposition of the American political world. Like, you got the neoliberals, and then you got the neoconservatives, and on both sides of the aisle, they come from the same intellectual school of thought. And if Bill Kristol wants to argue that, be my guest. I'd love to debate Bill Kristol or any of these other people that come from that cohort. They're all, what's crazy to me is they're all so brazen about it. They act like, and this has become the Democrat Party leaders' problem too in some respects, they act like we don't know, like we can't see it.
Yeah.
And they'll just triple down. They'll just triple down on it like, hey, well, my dad was a Trotskyite. I can endorse Imam Dani. There's no incongruence there. There's no lack of logical consistency in this. And so, that is the start of understanding what's happening in the conservative movement, is that in its inception, it had grave fundamental and ideological flaws.
Okay. The neoconservatives and neoliberals, I mean, don't you think these guys, if they took off their top jersey, they're wearing the same jersey underneath, and that's the Uniparty, and there is a thread, and you can tell it to us if you want. There's a thread of those guys. Like I look at even present day. I look at Hakeem Jeffries and Cory Booker, and then I look at Lindsey Graham and Ted Cruz, and I'm like, you guys are the same shit to me. You're literally the same thing. You have different ideologies, but even that, I feel like people are waking up to that being, if not fake, at least at the end of the day, if you take off that jersey, they're wearing Uniparty jerseys. What are your thoughts on that stuff?
1000% spot on. In fact, I think AIPAC is probably the greatest example of the American Uniparty.
Yeah.
And I don't say that like, as some, obscure, reference to AIPAC. I just mean literally, if you go to AIPAC's landing page, if you go to AIPAC's PAC landing page, there are 6 politicians shown on that page, and you have Catherine Clark, you have Hakeem Jeffries, I think you have there's one more individual on the Democrat side, but on the Republican side, you have Scalise, you have Mike Johnson, and you have Tom Emmer.
Yeah.
So again, that kind of tells you the whole story.
Yeah, it does.
Certainly for the conservative movement. I mean, in what world, when President Trump ran in 2016, and then again in 2020, and this last 10 years, I've seen a relentless effort to discredit him, even through the conservative media, the Fox Newses of the world and whatnot, about his associations, his affiliations, the things he condemns or he doesn't condemn, the things that he's willing to stand up and, draw, plant a flag on, draw a line and say, I don't support this or I do support this. I mean, there's been a nonstop, relentless effort to try and paint President Trump in one light or another based on the things he associates himself with or the decisions he makes or doesn't make, the people he endorses or doesn't endorse, the people that he condemns or disavows. How is it that our Republican House majority leader can sit on a landing page of a PAC with our national mortal enemy, the Democrats, because that's how the conservatives fence it. They don't act like the Democrats are just our polite political opponents. We're well past that.
Yeah,
they are. And I'm not saying it as a MAGA
I know what
voice.
you're saying. No,
Mike Johnson is saying it. Mike Johnson and the rest of the conservatives that are involved in that theater say it themselves. They go, the Democrats want to destroy this country.
Yeah.
Okay, well then why are you on the landing page with their leader?
Absolutely.
I mean, so we are diametrically opposed in ideology, the Republicans and Democrats. But when it comes to AIPAC, we're completely unified. And so my contention, and this is why I get a lot of pushback here in the Minnesota Republican Party, and this is why they don't bring me on a lot of mainstream conservative platforms, is I just call that out and say, well, this morally, this is incongruent. Morally, this doesn't hold up to scrutiny. Morally, this isn't consistent.
Yeah.
If we're saying that these people are as motivated to see the destruction of this country as you all say, then we should decouple from them. We should
everywhere.
we should AIPAC, the Republican Party, as long as the Republican Party, the conservative movement should give AIPAC a referendum. If you don't separate yourselves from the radical Hakeem Jeffries of the world, or the Democrat Party in general, because they are so radical in our view, then we're going to have to separate from you.
Yeah.
Then we're not going to be able to be affiliated with you guys. We're not going to be able to support you. So, and then AIPAC has a choice, and AIPAC can say, hey, well, we actually do want to roll with the conservatives. We do want to roll with the Republicans. We do want to roll with the party that at least pretends they have some love for Israel, right? I mean, we can talk about whether or not that's even true when you get down to it. But, at least on face value, they're not saying, Israel is an illegitimate nation, and that any nation built on conquered land is an illegitimate nation.
Right.
So, but they're not doing that. And that tells you everything you need to know about the Uniparty in one pretty package. Is like, all right, here are these 6 politicians from both sides of the aisle, and they all bend the knee to the Israeli lobby. It's actually disgusting.
No, it totally is, but it does tell you something, and people are starting to notice. All right, let me ask you this, man. 2016 Trump versus 2020 Trump versus 2024 Trump pre-getting shot in Butler, PA versus 2025 Trump, who we have now. Is this the same guy?
Well, I hope not.
I hope not. I hope not either. But you know what I'm saying, right? Like
when you get shot, when you almost get your head blown off, it tends to change you, for better or for worse. And I would say, just like I said to Kash Patel, without defending any of the corruption or any of the lies that it's like there's the world of politics as we see it on the front page. There's the world of politics as we see it through headlines, and then there's how things actually work. And I don't think people really understand just how entrenched and powerful some of these institutions are. And I think we turn a blind eye to it because it makes us physically uncomfortable at a sort of spiritual level. It makes us physically uncomfortable with how much power we've given to these people. We know it. We know we've given them too much power. Yeah. So we like to find a scapegoat to project our failure, really, as citizens, a failure of our civic duty. We like to find a scapegoat and go, he's the problem. It's like, no, you're the problem, not you, but we're the problem. Yeah. We gave the institutions too much power, and now we want a President Trump to come in with a superhero cape and act like a Kryptonian and be able to, dodge bullets, deflect bullets, be able to take on the CIA. Yeah. I mean, the international rules-based order and all of the various agencies of espionage and wicked black interests. And there is a government beyond the government, and President Trump has to fight that. So I think he's going through a maturation where now he understands the gravity of it. Now he understands just how dangerous of a situation he's in. And I think he's trying to play the cards as best as he can at 80 years old, right? Yeah. I mean, he's also 80. And I don't know, I talked to my grandfather the other day. I can tell that he's 80, right? I remember him when he was 50 and when he was 60. Yeah. He was a much different person then than he is now, even just in his cognitive recall. And I think the president is obviously way sharper than Joe Biden. That was also embarrassing what they tried to do and say that Joe Biden is competent. It was ridiculous. But I think the president is sharp. But I'm saying just his energy to fight a global world or a world order, an international shadow government, okay? An international shadow government, to have the energy to do that at 80 years old is remarkable. So I think he's different. I do say, and I hope that people who are supporters of President Trump and even the president himself can hear this well. He needs the young MAGA movement He needs the Young America First movement.
Yeah.
He needs their energy in order to succeed
Yeah.
in what he's trying to do. If that is his genuine motivation, is to defeat that global shadow government. He's going to need, whether he likes it or not, whether anybody likes it or not, we're going to need the Nick Fuentes followers. We're going to need,
Absolutely.
and you know what's even more scary? We're going to have to convince and convert some of these AOC followers as well. So that's the tough part about getting around this corner. So, you know, the problem that I have right now with the administration thus far is it saved the old for the, you know, against the new kind of deal, right? And we are kind of preserving, you know, we could talk about it. I mean, it's just even the Israel thing, right? It's like we all see it. I mean, it's not
everybody at this point, everybody sees that, and I think that is what's causing, you know, not releasing the Epstein files, the Israel thing, you know, Netanyahu coming to the White House 37, I'm kidding, but like what feels like 37 times in the past 6 months. I mean, people see that. People see attacking Iran when there's really no reason to attack Iran. Charlie Kirk even said, don't attack Iran. You know, people are noticing, man. That, I'll tell you another clip of yours that I absolutely loved. And it was when you were on Whitlock, and maybe we'll shift into that after, is, you know, you talked about like, why are we turning Gaza into a parking lot? For what? I'll have to find the exact clip, but it was so good and you were so dead on. And this was early. This might have been like early 2024. You're like, we're turning Gaza into a parking lot for what? And I think that was the beginning of like, you know, making Jason a little uncomfortable because Jason probably doesn't even know it, to be honest with you. Maybe he does now, but I think at that point, he didn't even get it. So maybe that uncomfortableness was being pushed down to him by Mark Levin or Glenn Beck or all those guys.
I don't think so. You know, well, we can talk about Jason in a moment, but again, I agree with you that the narrative about Israel is confounded on so many levels.
Yeah.
It's pretty straightforward, or at least it should be pretty straightforward, in my opinion. Americans come first. American citizens come first. Sure. America comes first. American citizens come first. It should be pretty straightforward, but it's not. Yeah. And again, to go back to the conservative movement, and I told this to Jason a number of times on the show about opposition and controlled opposition. I talked about the military-industrial complex. I talked about the framework of our foreign policy, and people don't like that. They'd much rather, you know, bicker back and forth and make, you know, clever remarks, puns or whatever about transgenders. And I think 100%. Transgenders are. I think the transgender psyop is as insulting to the American people and an affront to humanity as big as we've ever seen in history. But there are also bigger forces that, in fact, they're the forces that are really at work, fed into why the transgender psyop has even, you know, come to be, right? I mean, there's a link between the sort of mainstreaming of non-reality and the purveyors of the conventional world order. And you can just go read their white papers and see where a guy like Herman Kahn, for example, basically, you know, it says the quiet part out loud during his time, like, you know, we're going to use technology to create a world where the average American citizen or the average citizen anywhere in the world won't know what's real from what's fake.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we have going on now. But so, you know, I tried to tell Jason and the entire conservative movement way ahead of time that the America First and MAGA agenda is going to have to cross the issue of Israel at some point.
Yeah.
And they called me anti-Semitic because I said Israel is the linchpin of the New World Order.
Yeah.
It's not a comment about all Jews. It's not a comment about Israel categorically. It is a comment about the way Israel is strategically positioned in the geopolitical framework of the post-World War II Democrat liberal order. The first act of the United Nations was to concretize the nation of Israel as a legitimate nation. And ever since, America's foreign policy and America's role as the dominant world power has been to protect that framework, which is a reverse vassal empire, where we, you know, usually a vassal empire, the small kingdom pays tribute to the big kingdom for military protection.
Yeah.
In a reverse vassal state like we live in America, we pay everybody else to protect them. And
Yeah.
people go, well, would you go to the most dangerous nightclub or bar in your local town and be a bodyguard for free? No. Okay, now would you pay them to be a bodyguard at the? No, of course not. Why would I pay to be in danger every night? At a job that's shit. Well, if you're selling drugs out of the back door, then you would. Then you would pay to be at the front door. You would pay for that access. You would pay to be able to watch your investment. And that's what our American military industrial complex and our entire foreign policy right now is built around. Our dollar is our greatest national export. Our dollar is the thing that we used or have used to intimidate and bully other
Right.
nations to do what we want them to do, other leaders to do what we want them to do. And what did we get for it? We got an opioid crisis. When we went into Afghanistan, I think they accounted for 3% of the world's poppy production. When we left, it was 93%. And then you get a fentanyl crisis.
And by the
here
way,
in-
who reaped the profits of that? It wasn't the Afghani people. I'll tell you that.
It certainly was. Well, a few people got their
Yeah.
palms greased.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. A couple people in the mix.
But yeah, no, I mean the and this is why I said I took a lot of heat for saying the bad guys won World War II. That's what I'm talking about. When I
Yeah.
said the bad guys won World War II, I didn't mean it would have been better if the Nazis won. I didn't mean that your grandfather who fought in World War II
Yeah.
was a bad guy or he was on the wrong side. What I'm saying is the benefactors of World War II are the people who still profit today from that business model.
Yes,
And that
yes,
business
yes.
model where we go into a country like Afghanistan, we say we're going to bring freedom and democracy
Right.
by peace through strength
Right.
and make them self-determining was a fucking lie.
Yeah.
It was a lie. We didn't make the people of Afghanistan self-determining. We didn't bring them freedom and democracy. What we did was we went in for our own strategic national interest in the region to preserve a narrative, and we can talk about Osama bin Laden too, because I'm still not buying that story, as a matter of fact. But
not at all.
we went in there and we said we were going to teach them democracy. We end up trying to give them a suppository of transgenderism, and then the Taliban take back over, and we still are left with the opioid crisis here today from lifting the poppy production almost 100% from the country. So, and I only say that to again go back to the point. I've been warning people, and Professor Penn, he's another co-host of mine, Ukrainian Jew. They call me anti-Semitic. My only co-host is a Jew, and he just happens to believe in Christ, so maybe they don't even consider him Jewish, depending on who you talk to. But anyway, we've been saying for 2 years now, this thing is going to come down to Israel. And watch what the conservatives do when the Israel question comes up. It's going to show you the cuckery that existed in the conservative movement that's allowed them to be controlled opposition this entire time.
Yeah. And that cuckery started with George H. Bush, right? Was Reagan part of the cuckery?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Reagan's an interesting character. Reagan got caught up at a time where I think Reagan's individual personality and his wisdom and his warmth and his charisma allowed him to become something that transcended the corruption that was bubbling around him and underneath. I think even he probably was somewhat naive to it, just like President Trump in the first administration. And then he got wise to it, and then they shot him. So I mean, there's that too.
Definitely some similarities.
Yeah, well, I mean, history repeats itself, but
That's true.
but then I think Reagan had trouble. He transcended the corruption that was bubbling around him and underneath him, but then he had trouble crushing it. He couldn't find a way to crush the powers that be. He kind of just, he kind of threw his hands up and said, you know what, this is going to be what it's going to be, and my time is past. I can't fight all of the institutions, with where he was at that time. And George Bush had a different mentality. I mean, George Bush Sr. kind of looked at it like licking his chops. Oh, I think I can take the institutions. I'm an institutionalist.
Yes.
I'm going to capture the institutions. I'm going to control the institutions by force if necessary. And that's what the CIA and the security state and the intelligence community has become. It is the strong arm of the New World Order. The American intelligence apparatus and security state is the strong arm of the New World Order. Now, how much that relationship is Israel and how much it's us people can debate all day. And this is my only contention with Nick Fuentes, and I'll say it here. I do, but just like Alex Jones said, I do believe that people have, even turned Israel into a scapegoat in some sense.
I totally agree with that.
People have turned the Jews into a scapegoat. And I'm not saying that the Israel lobby doesn't have disproportional influence. I'm not saying that the Jewish identity isn't being grossly misused in a manipulative way. I'm not saying that Bibi Netanyahu isn't a bad hombre, because I think all of those things are true. But we still are using it as a scapegoat to avoid the accountability of the role that we've played as American citizens. And even, if you take it to a racial level, let's talk race.
Yeah.
When we talk, and again, I'm saying this as a criticism of Nick's ideas, or a few of them, because on a lot of things we would agree.
Do you guys know each other, by the way? Do you know Nick?
Don't know him. No. The funny thing is, when I first ran for Congress back in 2022, I was trying to unseat Ilhan Omar here in Congressional District 5 in Minnesota. And the first time the Washington Post called me, a reporter asked me about Marjorie Taylor Greene. She goes, well, you say you support Marjorie Taylor Greene. And I'm like, yeah, Marjorie's war room posse, and I like Marjorie. I think she's got guts, and I don't support everything anybody says, but I like Marjorie.
Yeah.
And
and you like her lately too, right? Like, you like her lately, the way she's been the past 6 months.
Oh, yeah. I think she's saying the quiet part out loud.
She was not on the bingo card. She's
saying the quiet part out loud.
Yeah.
Do I agree with everything she's saying? No,
but yeah.
Here's what I don't agree with. I don't agree with walking across the aisle and shaking hands with Anna Kasparian. And I'll get to that in a moment. This is what I mean by the Jews have become
There's so much good shit with you, Royce. Seriously, this is great. This is great. The reason I brought Nick up, and I'll let you finish, dude, if I had one conversation I want to hear right now, it's you and Nick. I really do.
I tried.
I'd love to hear that conversation.
I tried to do it.
Really?
I tried to do it. Look, and like I said, to end the story, the Washington Post calls me up and they say, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Well, what do you think about Marjorie Taylor Greene being at a rally with Nick Fuentes? And I was like, who's Nick Fuentes? I didn't know who he was. This was just 3 years ago. I had no clue who he was. I go, is he Spanish or what's his deal? And they were like, well, he's a white supremacist and he uses the N-word. And I said, well, if he uses the N-word, then, it's probably disrespectful, but I'd have to know the context and whatnot. And they didn't want to print any of that in the article. I didn't even know who Nick Fuentes was at the time, right? Yeah, and that's what I mean about this world of political commentary. Is like, I'm running for Congress. I'm doing an article with the Washington Post. They assume I know who Nick Fuentes is because in their world, there's this revolving door of main characters in this narrative and whatnot. But I didn't even know who he was. So, I think my critique of, on an ideological basis, one, I don't think IQ is a Christian idea. In fact, I think IQ and a lot of the other intellectual ideas that come from British academia in that era were explicitly anti-Christian, like Darwinism. I think Darwinism is a repudiation of Genesis almost to boot. I mean, I think literally Darwin's theory of evolution is a repudiation of the book of Genesis, the creation story of Adam and Eve. And, you could play with it how you want to and go, well, is the story of Genesis literal? Now you're seeing scientists say, hey, the human DNA does trace back to a single man. So there's a lot of science that's trying to affirm historical biblical text, right?
Yeah. Is that Fauci science or real science?
So, right, yeah. So I don't think IQ is a Christian idea, and I'll tell you why. The Bible tells us, Scripture tells us that the intellect can be developed. In fact, you can make an argument that the Bible, as much as a spiritual guide, is a guide of self-improvement, physical self-improvement, health, with your health, your relationships, and your personal development, which includes your intellectual development. The Bible is a guide to intellectual development. Well, if we believe that God does all things for a reason, and if we believe that the Scripture is influenced directly by the Holy Spirit, then the ability for one to develop their intellect is almost intrinsic of Christian faith. right? So if we say, and a lot of people with the IQ, topic make this claim that IQ intelligence is static. Intelligence isn't static. The way that people develop intellectually has a lot to do with the things they're exposed to. This is why, for example, when you think about the Western civilization, the West, post-Enlightenment European-based societies, the Westphalian nation state, all of these intellectual ideas are greatly built upon Aristotelian philosophy as well as Christianity. And Aristotelian, Aristotle, you go back to Aristotelian, metaphysics and philosophy, you find a huge premium on epistemology, right? The ability to acquire knowledge. What is knowledge? How do I decipher what's true and what's not true? And at a very first principles level.
Yeah.
And the fact that the West developed on top of that type of philosophical underpinning is why we've been able to come to the place where we are today, which is America being the greatest formulation of that evolution, of that intellectual, evolution. So none of that suggests that intelligence is static. What it does suggest, just like Nick, I think, would argue, is that in Western society, we developed intellectually within our own borders, but when we adventured to other places, we were more concerned with how we could use our advantage intellectually, to extract what we wanted from where we were going, from where we went. And that's in Africa, and that's in Asia, and that's in South America. And now we're reaping what we sowed, we're reaping what we sowed, because in that small area, we weren't morally right. And now they're using that against us. And this is the entire edifice of the anti-Western narrative. And I don't agree with it. I think that it's a misrepresentation of how history unfolds, and it's very selective with judgment of America and Western society versus all of other human history and human civilization. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But there is some truth to it as well. I think it's being manipulatively used, but there's truth in it, in that, we had an opportunity to really evangelize, to really take peace and freedom around the world by strength, freedom and democracy around the world by strength, by peace through strength. And instead, we used the British Empire's business model of drugs, piracy, and slavery. And we wrapped it in the faith of, we wrapped the British business model of drugs, piracy, and slavery in the cloth of Christ. That is a grave heresy. And we're paying the price for it now. Now, the good thing about us being a Christian culture is we have the opportunity to repent for that. Now, what does repentance look like? That's a
and by the way, you
discussion.
Consider yourself Christian, right? Not Catholic or Protestant.
No, I'm Catholic.
You're Catholic. Okay,
Yeah.
okay, you're Catholic.
Yeah, Deus Vult. I'm Catholic to the core.
Okay, so like, what is that? If somebody says they're Christian but don't consider themselves Catholic, what's the fundamental difference between you guys? And by the way, before you answer, I'm a non-religious dude. I'm trying to break down religion, and the way I do it is, or the way I've figured it out is, I think of it like an org chart, right? You got Christianity at top, then you got Catholicism, you've got Protestant, and then you've got, I guess, Orthodoxy or Eastern Orthodoxy. Those to me are the three. It's like Christianity is the chairman of the board. You got your C-suite with Catholics, Protestants, and then Orthodoxy. And then Protestants seem to branch out into like a billion different things, Lutheran, Baptist, all that stuff.
As you would expect.
Yeah, exactly. And I understand that now. But like, I'm trying to figure out, you as a Catholic, and Nick's a Catholic, Tucker's a Catholic, Candace is a Catholic. Where do you guys differ from someone that's a top line Christian follower of Jesus Christ, but doesn't necessarily consider themselves a Catholic?
I mean, this is
That's a fucking good question.
Yeah, it's a great question, but I mean, and there's so much to the schism between the Catholic Church and the Protestant revolt, the Reformation, I mean, it's an entirely new can of worms. I would say the main difference is rooted in history, in some regards, that we believe in the same scripture. We believe in the same God. We believe in the same Holy Trinity. We believe in the divinity of Christ. We believe in the blood of Christ. The Protestants, and in fairness to them, there was a lot of corruption in the early Catholic Church.
Okay.
As you would expect. There was a lot of corruption, which would become the Roman Empire and the Catholic Church's influence on the Roman Empire, and the Catholic Church's influence that continued on after the fall of the Roman Empire. In some respects, there was still a huge power base for the Pope in Europe, even after the Roman Empire had started to lose its power or its territorial integrity. So there was a lot of corruption in the early Catholic Church, and the defection of the Anglicans or of the Protestants is one that people debate, obviously. But the early Anglican Church and Martin Luther, and they had a legitimate gripe.
Yeah.
What people do with their gripe is different than whether or not the gripe is legitimate. It's like I say about revolutions, all revolutions aren't made equal and righteous. That's the heresy of the left. The left kind of tends to think that every revolution is made equal and righteous because, hey, the people in power are always corrupt. And the people in power are usually corrupt. That doesn't make your revolutionaries moral.
Yeah.
Martin Luther and his rejection of the traditional, church monarchy system had some legitimate gripes. I think the problem with it was, looking back on it now, the problem with it was they didn't understand the value of having a physical place. They didn't understand the value of having a physical place, and I think that's rooted in their intellectual interpretation of what they call sola scriptura, right? Is that the scripture exists independently of time and space and human beings' physical form. That there's no, it's actually kind of contrary to the fundamental Christian belief, because if we say that God is a God of the Holy Trinity, that there's the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and they all are one, then it kind of affirms the idea that mind, body, and spirit exist simultaneously. I don't know if that sounds too deep or philosophical.
No,
but
I get it. It's definitely
you understand what I'm saying, though?
Yeah, I do understand what you're saying. I do understand.
The Protestant interpretation of Christianity is that there's the scripture,
Yeah.
and there is the Holy Spirit in your direct link to God and through Christ, and that exists anywhere you go, regardless of anything else.
Yeah.
And I think there's some truth to that. I do believe that there is that we have the ability to speak directly to Christ.
Yeah.
No matter where we are.
Yeah.
However, from a human historical standpoint, I do believe that the 12 apostles built a church and called it and started to lay the building blocks for what became Christianity for a reason. That Christianity as a political movement, you could say, right, as a political entity and as a physical place where people could go worship on a schedule, right? On time, every day. They keep the sacraments still to this day in the Catholic Church on a schedule. That's why you hear the church bells everywhere there's a Catholic church all through the country, is because they are a time and history keeping organization for the Christian community, for the Christian record. And there's something important to that. And so this is interesting. This ties right into our Israel conversation. The reason why there's such a heavy Christian Zionist movement from the evangelical wing of the Christian community is because they don't have a central place called the church.
Yeah. Okay. That's
Their
interesting.
their institutions are all disparate and individual in their worship, and so Israel has become their de facto church.
Church. Yeah. Yeah.
Israel
Okay.
has become that physical place for the evangelical and Protestant movement in the absence of the Vatican, in the absence of Rome, in the absence of
Yeah.
a pope
Yeah.
and the Catholic Church. So, and you can understand it. I mean, I
No,
don't even.
totally. And the question becomes, was that done? And again, yeah, I'm a no religion guy, and I've
Yeah.
really learned religion over the past couple of years. Honestly, I've learned all this stuff post October 7th. I didn't give a shit about politics prior to October 7th. Post October 7th, things just didn't sit right with me. I thought the whole thing didn't feel right. Something felt off, and it's felt off to this day. And that's caused me to go back and look at 9/11, look at
Yeah.
JFK, look at World War II. I do want to get into World War II in a second, but what I want to ask you now is
9/11, JFK, the moon
all of them,
landings,
all of them. COVID,
just boomer
COVID,
fallacies. Yeah.
COVID, moon
Boomer.
landing. I love that you said that. I had Bart Sabrell on. I don't know if you know that guy. Bart's like the guy that's debunked the moon landing for years. But let me get back to
Yeah.
the Protestant movement. If there was a religion that to me has tried to hijack Christianity, I think it's the Protestant movement via the Schofield Bible, the 1909 Schofield Bible, and really trying to rewrite, it comes down to, this whole God's chosen people conversation and like
Yeah.
all of this stuff where the Ted Cruzes and the Franklin Grahams and the John Hagees, and I think I guess you'd refer to them all as the evangelical Christians, they're on one side, and I genuinely feel the Nick Fuenteses of the world. I mean, I think yourself, Candace, Tucker, I don't know where Trump is right now, but I feel like that's the division I'm seeing in MAGA.
Yeah.
You've got,
And I hope, and yeah, you're
you know what I'm saying? Like, I might even be confusing this shit, but
no. I think, I think that's a decent interpretation of it. There is a schism in the Christian community between the Catholics and the Protestants. But we live in a predominantly Protestant country.
Right.
Within a predominantly Catholic Christian global community.
Right. Okay.
Right.
Well
so
said.
there are more Catholics than Protestants globally, but there are more Protestants than Catholics in America. So,
Yeah.
That's a proper way to frame it. And I don't condemn the Protestants. It's the same way as like I take the liberals and the Marxists, the liberals and black people who live down in Democrat strongholds. And I tell Republicans all the time, you got to realize these people were raised with Marxism.
Yeah.
So don't be shocked by what you see. Don't ask yourself, why do they think that way? We know why they think that way. In fact, if I jump back to when we talk about the conservative movement, one of the great intellectual dishonesties of the conservative movement is our criticism of intelligence and education, as though we don't realize we gave up our educational institutions to the neoliberal, neoconservative world order for technological supremacy, you could say.
Right.
Military supremacy. We knew what we were doing. We knew that the Marxists were going to smuggle in non-reality to our young people, especially in black communities. We knew that they were going to bring the race theory. We didn't stop it because the way the public school system and the way the machine worked, even all the way up to the university level, was geared to win an arms race, win a technological race. And as long as we were pumping out, brilliant mathematicians,
Right.
In every anomalous, way we do, because they're few and far between. But as long as we were still winning the arms race or the technological race, we were fine with it. We didn't place a premium on intellectual currency. We didn't place a premium on philosophical currency. That's why we stopped teaching philosophy in the schools.
Yeah.
That's why we stopped teaching American civics in the schools. That's why we stopped teaching what they used to call it workshop is industry. What they used to call, I'm not sure they had it in school. It was when I got to school, it was already gone. But
Like shop, what? Yeah, I know. What was that
the
called?
industrial arts. They called it the
I
industrial
loved
arts.
those classes. Yeah.
Right. We stopped
like
teaching people the industrial arts.
newspaper
We stopped
holder.
teaching our kids, our young people, what it means to be American.
That's
And
very
not only
true.
American in the American 20th 19th century sense, but also what it means to be a responsible citizen of a nation state in the post-Enlightenment Western civilization sense. And we did it for a reason. So the conservatives, all of the intellectual highbrow debaters like Mark Levin want to act like, why do these Democrats think this way? It's because you and the rest of the military industrial complex spent more time and energy caping up for the special interests in the lobbies that would preserve that geopolitical and foreign policy framework so that we could protect Israel. But the point is, it's not even about Israel. Back to the Protestant and Catholic deal for a second. It's a schism that I hope we heal, but it's it's since time immemorial at this point. I mean, you're talking about thousands of years of schism, theological and religious schism. But I do understand both sides. Like, again, the Catholic Church is not without fault.
Sure.
And the one thing I will say is that your grassroots Catholic commentators are much more honest in their critique of the Catholic hierarchy than the Protestants are willing to critique the hierarchy of their own individual worship churches and of Israel as a kind of a physical, capital of their faith. So, we're I'm much like what I saw the Pope say a couple weeks back.
Yeah.
Was horrifying.
What did he say? I didn't even pay attention.
I mean, it's nonsense. With him, it's just nonstop. It's more woke,
Okay.
It was about illegal immigrants and whether or not illegal immigrants should be able to, somebody needs to teach them a history lesson on the fall of the Roman Empire and how the Catholic Church came to position it's in today and how the Anglican Church had to break away in the first place and the way the whole deal went down. He knows the history. Again, these people just aren't that honest, and it's a crying shame that the Catholic Church continues to cycle popes who do not represent the fundamental edifice of the Catholic faith. But Catholics can say that. Now, you find me an evangelical that'll say the same thing about Bibi Netanyahu.
Oh, they won't. They absolutely
okay.
won't.
So there's a difference worth noting.
Yeah.
Is that at least in the Catholic community, the same way much in the MAGA movement, if President Trump does something we don't agree with, like endorse Lindsey Graham, we go, hey, what the fuck is that?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But on the Democrat side, anything Obama does is good. Is okay.
Totally,
right.
Totally,
They'll jump through a bunch of hoops to justify it and pacify it. So there is a difference, I believe, and that is part of the difference. Is we'll question our hierarchy on the Catholic side of things. The Protestants seem to have an inability almost to question Israel or Bibi or
There's
even
definitely an inability on that. I mean, and again, as the outsider when it comes to religion, when I look at the John Hagees of the world and the Franklin Grahams and the even Paula White, who Trump appoints a spiritual advisor, and then I look at the clips of these people that I find on the internet, I'm like, this is insanity. Like, these people are psychotic. And it always makes me think, like, why does anybody follow these guys? You know what I mean? Like, to me, that is such a stain on not only Protestant or whatever denomination they are, but it's a stain on Christianity. And then it causes me to think okay, let's now talk about, you got 2.6 billion Christians in the world. You've got 2.1 billion Muslims in the world. I had Reverend Munther Isaac, the Palestinian Christian reverend that lives in Gaza. He's been on Tucker. He's been on everywhere. It was such a great conversation. And I asked him, I said, hey, do Palestinian Christians like yourself and Palestinian Muslims get along? And his answer was the same answer I get from everybody. He's like, absolutely, we get along. We love each other. And then I started digging into okay, what do Muslims think of Jesus? Like, what's their take on Jesus? And it's insane how much respect Muslims have for Jesus. They think he's the Messiah.
I'll give you a good example. I'll give you a great example of this. We just had the state fair here in Minnesota, and I had a booth for 12 days. And the the school shooting by transgender jihadist there at Annunciation Catholic School happened in the middle of the state fair. So we gave away these T-shirts. We probably gave away about 600-700 T-shirts for free that said "Jesus is King." It was by far the most popular T-shirt at the fair. We had several. We probably had 10 different styles, but the "Jesus is King" shirt was the most popular by far, especially with the young people, which is a great sign. But anyway, I put a banner up above my booth that said "Jesus is King." Not a single Muslim over the court, and remember now, we 80,000, 100,000 Somali immigrants, all Muslims here in Minnesota, walking through the state fair every single day. Not a single Muslim stopped and said anything disrespectful about the sign or Jesus in the entire time. Now, am I going to say that there's nothing wrong with our Somali immigrant community? Am I going to say there's nothing wrong with Islam? Am I going to say that there's no difference of opinion theologically between us and the Muslims, the Catholics and the Muslims, or Christians and Muslims? No. But what I am saying is the only people who came up and were disrespectful about the Jesus is King sign were white, progressive, young white progressive people. Probably atheists, obviously, at least they sounded
probably.
that way.
Right.
But those were the only people who were flippant and disrespectful about the term Jesus is King. So, I mean, that tells you something. It does tell you something about the Muslims, though, that, you know, when they come into contact with Jesus, at least conceptually, their immediate impulse is not to be disrespectful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, as the outsider, I'm like, man, you guys agree on him being the Messiah. You revere Mother Mary. You know, you believe he's coming back. You disagree on a few things. And this ties back.
Yeah, but they're not, but see, they're not insignificant things either.
No, I get it. I get that. I mean, but it's they're core theological things, right?
Yeah, it's a big deal. I mean,
Okay,
it is a big, yeah, it's a big deal. Now,
I get that.
For example, so you give credit where it's due, but you don't where it isn't. And you know, the Muslims, first of all, there's a lot of historical evidence that Muhammad called for early Catholic monks and friars to help build the Quran, to help build the early Muslim faith. So that, and a lot of people, you call them conspiracy theorists or not, but a lot of people believe that Islam is in fact a creation of the Catholic Church for that reason. And that's also why you see there are people who have, theories that there's a lot of alliance behind the scenes between the Vatican and the Arab Muslim world. I don't know how much credibility there is to that. I can see it from a geopolitical standpoint. You kind of see the two never shall meet. You know, the two never shall kind of cross paths. They kind of stay separate. The Vatican and the Catholics and the Muslims, and it's a strange kind of deal. But the Muslims and early Islam, and Muhammad's influence on early Islam, and all these other developments within Islam, like the Hadith and Sharia law, and these things are not a part of the same scripture that they revere Christ in. Now they view Christ, and they refer to Christ in the Quran and in Islam as the penultimate prophet, right? That Jesus is in fact the prophet, but see, it already kind of breaks down because Muhammad is held up as a higher, first and foremost.
Okay, I got you.
So Christ was the penultimate prophet, but then Muhammad is the father of the faith. So these are already kind of incongruencies and contradictions. And then it gets to a point where somewhere along the line it kind of separates from the Old Testament altogether, in that Jesus becomes just another man, right? He's not divine, but Muhammad is pretty much held up as a divine figure, even though I don't think that Muhammad is considered divine. In a supernatural way. He's certainly held in that regard in terms of the the practice of the faith.
Yeah, I feel you
And
on that.
so
I feel you on
we're
that.
just not putting Muhammad ahead of Christ ever.
I got
And
you. I got
Christians
you.
will never put Muhammad ahead of Christ in a billion years. It's not going to happen. And furthermore, from a political standpoint, Sharia law is incompatible with the West.
Yeah.
Bottom line, there's no ifs, ands, or buts. We're not doing Sharia law. Here and I got a bunch of Somalian friends and they're Muslims, and when I refer to Jesus as Isa, they all smile because they know I've read into what the faith practice is, and that's what they call Jesus Isa in Islam. But we're just we can talk about these things. I kind of agree with Nick when he goes, let's just get out of it altogether as Christians. And then I kind of agree with President Trump when he says, well, Christians should have Jerusalem in a 3-state solution. Or not him, but Steve Bannon said, Christians should get Jerusalem in a 3-state solution. I kind of agree with that too.
Are Bannon and Trump cool these days, by the way?
I can't say. I don't know.
Okay.
I'm not aware.
Okay.
Me and Steve don't have those kind of conversations.
Okay.
I never ask him if he's talked to President Trump or not. I hear it from the public like everybody else. Me and Steve talk very one-to-one. I talk to him and we talk. We rarely talk about anybody else.
So
unless it's something blatant like, when Mark Levin started going off saying that Bannon was a fifth column isolationist. It's like, dude, Mark, give me a break. You're such a scumbag. And, it's, again, I say this. So Islam, we set to the side and say, do they have a certain respect for Jesus? Some. There is some historical faith. Do I think that Muslims are going to be nice to they're not being nice to them in Africa? Yeah. They're slaughtering them in Africa. There's a genocide of Christians in Africa by radical Muslims. So, but Christians have slain each other in the past.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a level of nuance about the history of our society and the history of religion that makes it very difficult for us to discuss these things, because everybody wants to jump on a side of a thing. It's like, that's partly why I haven't gotten a lot of traction, I think, because I don't do that. Let's just talk about what it is. Muslims are not the monolithic terror that the Fox Newses of the world have tried to make them, so that they could steal your tax money and uphold this military industrial complex. Sharia law is not compatible with the West. Muslims hold Muhammad up higher than they do Jesus, and Christians aren't going for that. And if they think that we're going to let them come here and take all the political offices and then institute Sharia law, they got a war on there. They got a fight coming, and I think we win that fight. I think we win a fight against the Muslims today, unified today, the same way we did during the Crusades.
Yeah. I hear you on all that. I guess in my mind, when I think of Islam and Christianity, to me, it's again becoming obvious. This is they're pitting these two up against each other for the military-industrial complex. It's the boogeyman. It's the big bad wolf. We went from the Cold War ending in 91 or something, and then literally out of the ground pops Muslim extremists. You know what I mean? Like I've come to the realization that there always needs to be an enemy. There's got to be an enemy in order for you to funnel money into, this military-industrial complex. This shit is real. I mean, it's complicated, but it's really not. But I'll tell you what, it is fucking real, and it's happening.
It's convoluted. It ain't complicated.
It is convoluted, and it touches on all these things. It's that common thread, and it really goes back to something you said quite at the beginning, where you're like this globalist shadow government. The question is, and man, answer it if you want. Don't if you don't. Who is that? Who is this globalist shadow government? And it's like, I want to name names, but we might not even know those names. You know what I mean?
People would not name the names because of cowardice. There are people who know. I mean, just follow the money, at some level, there's a level of wealth where you can't even follow the money anymore, because the money is intergenerational, and it's buried in assets and shell companies and all kinds of other investments that make it hard to track. Where anybody who had the power to track it is paid not to. And that's become a a dark mark on our own government as well, where I think we know exactly who's running things or who's influencing things in a certain direction and why,
Yeah.
and we don't prosecute them because they pay the toll, pay to
Yeah.
play.
Yeah.
But you can follow the money. It's like human beings are greatly motivated by their own self-interest and power and
Yeah.
greed, and you can follow those things and figure. Look, again, there's an argument that could be made. Christian Zionism,
Uh-huh.
Catholicism, and Islam are all a part of the same global psyop to divide and conquer. And actually, the atheists make that claim, and that's the stronghold of the atheist claim. They
Yeah.
go, all religion is intended to divide. Well, you go, nah, that wasn't the intention of the religion, but
Yeah.
it certainly is being used that way, and that's a failure of believers in God
Yeah.
at some level. Do we abandon religion because of that? Absolutely not. No, that is not the answer. The answer isn't to say because religion is being used by the corrupt, now we abandon the morals and ethics and reality altogether. Kind of a supernatural goodness or righteousness. Those aren't the answers. It's kind of the same way where, again, I said this about the early church. What the Anglicans didn't realize, or what Martin Luther didn't realize, is it's important to win the battle within the institution.
Mm-hmm.
To abandon the institution is to kind of have this arrogance or narcissism that you're bigger than the group, that you're bigger than that you individually are bigger than the collective. That's partly why I respect President Trump. A guy who is as popular as President Trump could obviously run independent,
Yeah.
but he ran as a part of the Republican Party because he understands the value of the institution and this two-party system, and how if you abandon a thing, you leave it to the corrupt people.
Yeah.
It's just like this country. Should we abandon it? Should American citizens get up and leave this country because our government's been corrupt? If that's
No,
the
of course
case,
not.
where are you going to go? And if you're going to run every time an institution becomes corrupt, then eventually you'll have nowhere to go.
Yeah.
There will no longer be such a thing as citizenship of a nation state if you just run from the corruption. So you have to fight the corruption in the institution. Martin Luther and the Protestants should have fought the corruption inside the Catholic Church. The Republican Party, the MAGA movement and the America Firsters have to fight the corruption inside the Republican Party, and everybody else as global citizen. Global. There's no such thing as a global citizenship, but let's call them free people of the world, have to fight the corruption within their own nation and against this shadow government. Who is it? Uh, you know, eh, Follow the money. Follow
No,
the
I
money.
feel you, man. I get it. All right, let me ask you this, and I'll just ask you one or two more things, and because I know we're getting long.
Yeah.
Eh,
Well,
The
I made you
only
wait. I made you wait, so we can go as
No,
long as
it's
you
all
want.
good. Man, I feel like we could go for like 6 hours. This could be like
Yeah.
a Lex Friedman, Scott Horton interview or something. All right, let me ask you this. So,
Yeah.
the only hole I've ever been able to poke in things of yours that I've watched was your initial take on Black Lives Matters, because I think
Yeah.
you were kind of all in on that effort. And maybe I'm wrong, by the way. My buddy Brandon was the one. He's like, yo, the only hole we can poke in Royce is that. And maybe we were wrong, but where did you start out with that, and then where are you at now? And by the way, separate the three words. I'm obviously a huge Black lives. Of course they matter. They absolutely do. But like that
Yeah.
movement, where did you start? Where are you at now?
Well, the question is, they matter to who?
Okay, good point.
Right now, it would seem that Black Lives Matter don't matter to Black people first and foremost, and that's something that I try and deal with first and foremost, because
Mm,
I think you do have to deal with your own community, your own neighborhood, your own people first and foremost. Also, another thing that the Jewish community in America seems unable to do, honestly, and the Jewish community and the Black community share similarities in that way. I think the Black identity and the Jewish identity is used the exact same way, in that we should make the federal government We should infinitely expand the federal government in America because if not, racists will take advantage of black people. We should infinitely expand global governance and destroy the nation state because if not, fascists and anti-Semites will persecute the Jews. So it's the same exact motif. As far as Black Lives Matter go, look, I came from the NBA and the sports world, and obviously there's a huge liberal lean on mainstream media, and especially in professional sports. All of those sports leagues have gone woke more or less in one way or another. But I wasn't really involved in the political, not the political of the day. I fought the NBA on mental health policy.
Yeah.
And I said, hey, we should have first of all, mental health is a real thing. It's going to be the greatest social issue we face. And our global corporate community better get ahead of this and do something about it before we all have to live with the consequences of neglect. I didn't know then that the decay of mental health globally was a part of the technocratic globalist agenda. I was naive to that at 21 years old. But so I came from that world. When you come from that world, you're naturally going to talk about things in an inclusive manner because mental health is the subgenre of all humanity, right? Mental health is the umbrella under which all things could sit, minus the spiritual. And in some sense, again, in a Christian theology, the mind, body, and spirit are a convergence of the human existence and the human condition. So I came from that world where mental health was my thing.
Yeah.
So, when George Floyd died, it was an interesting time here in Minnesota and in Minneapolis, especially people forget that we were coming off of the COVID lockdowns.
Yeah.
And so there was already a real impulse to rebel, for people to go out into the streets, for people to protest something because something didn't sit right. And it was something that didn't sit right with COVID, but we are all, and we were so, uninformed about the scientific implications of what was happening during COVID and the implications of pandemics that we were kind of handcuffed in that regard. With the pandemic, we kind of just had to hold our breath and put a mask on and wash our hands 50 times a day and hope Dr. Fauci wasn't a fucking asshole, what else could you do? Because unless you're a scientist, an epidemiologist, or, you kind of hard to make heads or tails of what was going on there. So it's worth it to note that the George Floyd situation happened on the tail end of 2 months of lockdowns. Remember, we got locked down here in Minnesota in March. The thing with George Floyd happened at the end of May, so almost 3 months. And that's a long time for people who have never been isolated, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so emotions already running high, people in fear. I will say, when I first saw the video, I was repulsed by what happened that day.
Sure.
And I part ways with a lot of Republicans, a lot of MAGA, a lot of conservatives when talking about the police. I think the police are the lowest rung of the military-industrial complex, and they have become the rent-a-cops for a national enterprise of special interests and special interests and lobbies and a banking cartel. The same way that our military men have become the rent-a-cops for an international banking cartel of special interests and lobbies. So, we in the conservative movement have a deep, deep affection for the police because the woke left has gone out of their way to demonize them. So it's a natural response. The woke left is trying to make the claim that every white cop is racist and your biggest threat in America as a black man is being killed by a white cop. Stupid. Your biggest threat in America as a young black man of being killed prematurely, not of natural causes, is another young black man. That's just a statistical fact. So, but our reaction to it was to give carte blanche to our police to do whatever the hell they want, and that's un-American. American citizens have to value citizenship, and an authoritarian police state directly threatens the integrity of what we call citizenship. And you can go back to the Roman Empire, and you can go to the scripture if you're a Christian Zionist and you like that sort of thing. We can go to the scripture and say, when Paul confronted the Centurion guard and asked, I'm a Roman citizen. Do you have the right to beat a Roman citizen who has not yet seen his day in court? Do you have the right to beat a Roman citizen, bind and beat a Roman citizen who has not yet seen his day in court? And the Centurion guard stopped, because the idea and the value of Roman citizenship at that time was so high, the guard feared punishment and penalty from the state, from the empire, for transgressing another citizen's citizenship. Okay, so we've lost that in this country. We've given that up. And I say on my podcast, convenience will be the death of freedom. On the left, they've given up their freedom for social security, the security of social status, social improvement, and also social benefits like welfare and food, for example, medical, Medicaid. On the right, we've given up that security, that freedom for the security, physical security of rule of law and military might, military prowess all around the world, peace by strength. So two sides of the same coin. We've traded our convenience for security. When I watched that tape that day, I thought to myself one thing: this is wrong, what he's doing.
Yeah.
But even more so, the virality of the clip is going to make Minneapolis ground zero for a turning point in this country.
Yeah.
And it continues to prove to be, the George Floyd thing, that Minneapolis and Minnesota is the epicenter of the color revolution that we see. That narrative about George Floyd, there was Black Lives Matter before George Floyd. George Floyd was the inflection point of that movement. And it was so big that even though Black Lives Matter has since sort of died off as an organization, the racial animus proceeds, right? And I think we make a mistake in the conservative movement on this George Floyd issue. And I'll just say it. First of all, let's talk about it from a political standpoint. Everybody who was out there that day who may have had a Black Lives Matter sign or a Black Lives Matter t-shirt or posted Black Lives Matter on their social media is not a part of the George Soros-funded Black Lives Matter organization. Many of them are just as casually invested in the Black Lives Matter narrative as your Christian Zionist is invested in Bibi Netanyahu's policies.
Yeah.
And so, but people have trouble with understanding that dichotomy of propaganda. And I look at it and I say, I can just call the balls and strikes on both. Was George Floyd mistreated that day as an American citizen? But the George Floyd thing, here's my take on it. He was mistreated that day. That could have been handled better. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
Simple thing is this: had George Floyd died with his hands cuffed behind his back, sitting up against the cruiser, none of this would have even happened. The entire George Floyd narrative dies in the cradle. Right. Sure, they even if they didn't apply the Narcan on time, and he had died with his hands behind his back, sitting up against the cruiser, the whole situation would have died right there in the cradle, as far as how big it got. Yeah. The fact that, and another thing is, when a person's body goes limp underneath you, I know this from being a mixed martial artist and jiu-jitsu guy. When a person's, like if I get you in a rear naked choke, for about 10, and you see this sometimes for about 10 seconds, 8 seconds, like in a UFC fight, a guy won't know that the guy went out, right? Yeah. But after 3 minutes, you know that the guy's no longer conscious.
Yeah.
So that was wrong. But
100%.
His prosecution was political. And I think his prosecution was wrong. It was wrong in that it was political. It was wrong in that, it was a jury that was obviously influenced by the widespread propaganda and narrative that none of us could have missed in this country. And there were a lot of internal local politics that played a role in that situation. So the people that say the case should be reopened and the evidence should be looked at again, I'm in complete support of that. We want to look at all the evidence time and time again until we come to a just outcome. My overall statement is this. George Floyd and some of the other situations are much different. And the left does a very cunning thing by trying to clump them all together and make any white people who oppose them oppose the thing in its entirety, right? That's a good way to trick a person into being in a racist position. Oh, you don't think any police mistreat any black people? Yeah. Why say that? That's stupid. That's dumb, because police mistreat white people. Absolutely. So we kind of fall into that trap where it's like, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, Tamir Rice, all of it's just BLM bullshit. No. And here's a linkage between the two. I
agree with you 100% on all that. Absolutely.
Here's a linkage between the two. Black people are in a crisis in this country. The black community is in chaos, and it is the epitome of undereducated, misled, misrepresented self-destruction. There's no doubt about it. I have probably a 800 to 1,000 word post that I'm putting up on X about my problems with the black community in Black America right now. But Black people were the number one group not to take that COVID-19 vaccine. So how do we reconcile that, right? How do we say, man, for some people who are stupid as hell, they sure as hell were smart enough.
That is so interesting. I didn't know that. I did not know that.
The two biggest groups to not take the vaccine were PhDs, and Black people. Two different ends of the intelligence scale.
Wild. Well, supposedly two different ends of the intelligence scale.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's right. Apropos to my comment earlier about IQ. But so, yeah, the George Floyd, the point is, I was never involved with Black Lives Matter. I was never involved with that organization.
Okay.
I led my own independent, marches to the Federal Reserve. And my point was to say, hey, we want to, this was a tragedy and everybody's watching. If this is a moment the community is going to come together and have a conversation, cool. Let's talk about the real things. Let's talk about how money works.
Yeah.
The police aren't your problem. The police are hired guns. The police are hired working class people who are taking orders and doing what they're told to do. The people who run the Federal Reserve, they know exactly what they're doing. This is a high level, sophisticated attack on the value of your citizenship and what's going on in your community. That was my role in the George Floyd thing. And my question and contention with the conservatives is, where the fuck were you all?
Yeah.
Why is it? This is a failure of conservative civic duty. If you see thousands of people coming to congregate in a single place, where were your Bibles and constitutions? Why was I down there making the atheist purple-haired liberals pray all by myself? Yeah. Why was I down there talking about the corruption of the Federal Reserve all by myself? Where was Tom Emmer? Where was Mark Levin? Where was Bill O'Reilly or any of these other conservative commentators who have all of these opinions about liberals in the inner cities? Why didn't you take the opportunity when everybody was gathered in one place to come and teach them? See, and that is the controlled opposition. We talk about Black communities, we talk about Muslims, we talk about liberals and Marxism to raise money and get clicks and get views, but we don't actually want to go evangelize. We don't want to create and convert people to American citizenship and values. And the question is, why? My contention is that they don't really believe in it themselves. They don't understand the fundamentals themselves.
Yeah. My man, I've got to read you this. This is funny. So when I was preparing for this, I used like a thing in ChatGPT. And so I was asking about you, and it says, what makes him interesting as a guest? And this is so perfect because I think everybody just experienced this. It says, Royce White doesn't talk in sound bites. He talks in frameworks. And that's exactly what you did today, man. You talked in framework. So listen, I really appreciate it. I would love to do a part 2. All right, listen, everybody. I hope you guys got as much out of that as I did. We got part 2 coming with Royce, so stay tuned for that. But call a spade like Royce does. And my man definitely talks in frameworks and not sound bites. So, all right, call your parents, call a spade, and Royce, hang on the line.
This episode was brought to you by Zippix nicotine toothpicks. Zip more, smoke less. Totally satisfying, discreet, and delicious. Zippix nicotine-infused toothpicks are available in 6 great flavors, each containing at least 2 milligrams of nicotine to curb those cravings. Zippix is FDA registered and proudly made in the USA. Use discount code DSD for 10% off your order at zippixtoothpicks.com. Zip more, smoke less, save 10%.